This is a lecture from Open Tuition. For the free lecture notes that go with this podcast, please visit opentuition.com. Right, well, I'm going to work through the Specimen exam for the ACCA paper F3. And the Specimen exam because the ACCA don't publish any of the real exams. Also, the Specimen exam is available both in computer-based version and paper version. Because of copyright, I can't show the computer-based on the screen, so I'm using the paper-based version, and so make sure you've got a copy in front of you. Just a few things before I actually start going through the questions. One is, you should be aware there are the two sections. Section A, which is all multiple choice questions for 70 marks, and then Section B, which is two longer questions of 15 marks each. The pass marks 50%. 50 is pass, 49 is fail. And rather importantly, in Section A, you'll see as I go through the questions, Section A, the multiple choice, although they all carry the same number of marks, some of them are a lot easier, some of them are a lot harder. It's quite deliberate. And so do be prepared to what you might call jump around. You know, when you do them in Section A, all right, start at number 1, number 2, and so on. But as soon as you come to one that you're finding difficult, either because there's a lot to read, or it's something you know you're not very good at, or you just get stuck, you can't find none of the choices of answers what you're getting, you must move on, you must leave it. You know, if you spend 20 minutes on one question, then you've got a huge problem because you're not going to finish. You must move around, get the easy ones out of the way. If you jump over all the long ones or the hard ones, by the time you've got to the end of Section A, you should be well on the way to getting certainly half the marks for Section A. And then you can go back and you can start spending longer on the harder ones. And particularly important if you're doing the computer-based exam is do practice on the ACCA website. Get used to what the screens look like, because you can jump over questions, you can come back to them later, but you don't waste time in the exam sorting out how to navigate around it. As I'm going to go through the questions, I'll explain obviously what I'm doing as I go through it. I can't give a full lecture on each bit. There are lectures on the website, so if something doesn't make sense, watch the lecture. If you need, ask in the Ask the Tutor forums, and I'll do my best to help. Finally, although the calculation questions, I'll show my workings on the screen, and I'll try and make them neat enough so you can follow them. Appreciating the exam, nobody will look at your workings. Section A in particular, it's computer marked. The answers are either right or wrong. So don't waste time doing pretty workings. You'll need to do some workings, but don't waste time being neat. It really is a speed exercise. You will be under huge time pressure. Okay, well, let's start working through Section A of the exam. Although I said earlier, in the exam, do be prepared to jump over hard questions, long questions, to avoid any confusion. I'll obviously go through them in order. So first of all, question 1. Which of the following calculates a sole trader's net profit for the period? And even a quick look at the choices, it should be very obvious this is testing you on the accounting equation. And you should know, you should have learned that the increase in net assets over a period, net assets only change for 3 reasons. The increase is equal to any profit plus any capital introduced minus any drawings. And of course the increase in net assets is the net assets at the end of the year minus the net assets at the beginning. So the closing net assets minus the opening net assets. And so that's the equation. It's just a question of rearranging it to get what they want here. They want to know what the net profit is. And so closing net assets minus opening net assets. Well, we said it's profit plus capital minus drawings. Well, we want to know what the profit is, so subtract capital introduced from both sides. Add drawings to both sides. And there we are. The profit, which of these works? It's the closing net assets minus opening net assets, so all of them have that in, minus capital introduced, A and C have that, plus drawings. Well, the answer is A. So it always takes me a few minutes to rearrange it, but as long as you don't rush too much and you're careful, that should be a relatively easy question. Number 2. Which of the following explains the impressed system of operating petty cash? Well, you should have been through the lectures and you'll have seen what we mean by impressed. Impressed is where, at irregular intervals, perhaps once a week, we reimburse, we put more money into petty cash, but the amount we put in is always equal to the amount that's been spent. So if we spent $10, we put in $10. If we spent 20, we put in 20, to keep bringing it back to a fixed float. So which of these? A, weekly expenditure cannot exceed a set amount. What you can spend is what you've got, but that's not the imprest system. B, the exact amount of expenditure is reimbursed at intervals to maintain a fixed float. Well, that's what I just said. The answer is B. If you're confident in the exam, don't even waste any time reading the other two. You will be under time pressure, as I said before. However, since we are, we'll read through them. C, all expenditure out of petty cash must be properly authorised. Well, that's true, but that's not what the imprest system is. And fourthly, regular equal amounts of cash are transferred into petty cash at intervals. No, the amount transferred is always equal to the amount that's been spent. So number 2 is B. Number 3, which of the following statements are true of limited liability companies? Number 1, and the wording here, they are trying to trick you a bit on these. Number 1, the company's exposure to debts and liabilities is limited. No. No. There's no limit. If they owe money, they owe money. That's not true. 2, financial statements must be produced. That is true. And 3, a company continues to exist regardless of the identity of its owners. Yes, the company is separate from the owners. The company stays, however much the owners might change or whatever. So it's 2 and 3 that are true. The answer is C. Number 4. The first real calculation one. Before you start reading all the information, always look what's required, otherwise you risk wasting time. What figure should appear for purchases in Annie's statement of profit or loss for the year ended June X6? So we want a figure for purchases, and if you look back, Annie is a sole trader who does not keep full accounting records. The following details relate to her transactions with credit customers and suppliers for the year ended. And you've got a great long list there. Receivables at the beginning of the year, payables at the beginning of the year, and, well, I'll read them as I need them, but the whole list. Well, remember, it's purchases we're after. We've been given details relating to transactions with credit customers and suppliers. Well, if it's purchases we're after, it's suppliers we're after. And the best approach of this sort, as soon as you realise what we're after, is to write up a payables ledger control account or a total payables account. Remember, I said earlier, how you do your workings is your choice. Nobody will look at it, but I think for this time, this is the quickest. So let's write up what we know, just what will go in the payables account. So running down the list, receivables, not relevant. Total payables, at the beginning of the year was 60,000. The payables as a liability, so we'd have a credit balance at the start of the year of 60,000. Cash received from customers, not relevant. Cash paid to suppliers, yes. Credit cash, debit, payables, 302,800. Discounts allowed, well, remember we allow discounts to customers, so that's not relevant. But discounts received, we get discounts from suppliers, it reduces the amount we owe. So debit payables, credit discounts received. Contra between payables and receivables. Well, contras, remember, they always reduce receivables and they reduce payables. So if it's reducing our payables, debit, how much? 2,000. No problem. In a minute, we've got the final balance. However, of course, the one figure that's missing is the purchases during the year. And the purchases, debit purchases, credit payables. Well, that is the figure we're trying to calculate. Finally, though, although usually in real life you'd clearly have all those figures and then you'll work out the final balance. Here we're given the balance at the end of the year. On 30th of June, the payables are 84,000. And remember, we want to end up with a credit balance of 84. Normally, the balance is the missing figure. We carry it forward from the opposite side. But again, here, we know the figure. Purchase is the missing figure. Well, now it's just calculator work. The total of the debit side. I hope somebody's checking me. I get 139. No, I don't at all. I get 3,91760. And so, to make the other side add up to 3,91760, the missing figure. Subtract the 60,000, 331,760. There we are. Yes, the correct answer is C. All right, number 5. Which two of the following errors would cause the total of the debit column and the total of the credit column of a trial balance not to agree? Very standard here. Let's check. Remember, it's any two. Look, if you look at the choices, it's any two of these. The question is which two? Let's run through. Number 1, a transposition error was made when entering a sales invoice into the sales day book. Well, transposition error is when you switch numbers round, but the type of error here is irrelevant. We've entered an invoice into the sales day book. And remember, the way the system works, we take the total from the sales day book and we debit receivables, credit sales. Well, even if the total's wrong, okay, you'll be debiting receivables, crediting sales with the wrong figure, but as long as you're debiting and crediting with the same figure, the trial balance will balance. The only time it doesn't balance is when the debit doesn't equal the credit. So although putting the wrong figure in the day book will give you the wrong total in the day book, there is an error, it won't affect the balancing because, again, the debit and credit will have been on the same total. It's not number one. Immediately, incidentally, you know the answer's C or D. So if you can't sort out the others, at least guess. You know, you don't get minus marks. At least guess. And between C and D, you have a 50% chance of getting it right and of getting the marks. However, we'll do it properly. Number 2. A cheque received from a customer was credited to cash and correctly recognised, correctly entered in receivables. What should we do when we receive a cheque? You should debit cash because you've received money and credit receivables. Well, it says it's been correctly entered in receivables, but in cash it says we've credited cash. Well, again, if the debits equal the credits, trial balance will balance, but if the debits don't equal the credits, it won't. Well, of course, 2 credits, the trial balance won't balance. Number 2 is correct. Number 3, a purchase of non-current assets was missed out from the accounting records. If it's missed out, you've had no debit, you've had no credit. And so, even though if there should be, in total debits would equal credits, it's not number 3. The thing would still balance. Well, from the choices we now know the answer, but let's read it anyway. Number 4, rent received was included in the trial balance as a debit balance. Well, rent received is income. If it's income, it should be a credit. Debit cash, credit rent received. So it should be a credit. If it's listed as a debit, the total debits won't equal the total credits. Number 4 would cause it not to agree. So the ones that cause it not to agree are 2 and 4. The correct answer is D.